The afternoon sun sank over Redstone like a heavy quilt, wrapping the town in a dry, suffocating heat. Wind swept across the main street, lifting red dust into the air, clinging to skin, hair, and every crease of worn clothes. Folks lounged under porches, fanning themselves with paper or draining the last of watered-down lemonade. Any movement was enough to draw sweat, so when the clatter of wagon wheels echoed from down the road, heads turned. A battered stagecoach rolled around the corner and pulled up before the old saloon. Hooves stilled, and for a moment, the main street fell quieter than usual. A door opened. Isabel Turner stepped down. Her dress was no longer new, once blue, now faded to gray ash. A thin scarf lay loose over her head, unable to hide a sun-darkened face weathered by long miles. In her hands she carried only two small cloth bags, light enough to bring along, meager enough to speak of a life both lost and beginning again. People stared and whispered. A young black woman, alone. A widow, someone murmured, as if the lines on her face told the story plain. Curiosity mixed with prejudice. Some frowned, some shook their heads. Most simply stared without shame. Isabel did not lower her gaze. She lifted her chin, eyes steady, as though she had long since grown used to such looks. Yet beneath the firmness, for the briefest instant, her eyes flickered with doubt. Was this truly a place she could stand? Across the street, under the porch of a lumber shop, a man was watching. Rhett Callahan. He leaned against a post, cap pulled low, rough hands still dusted with sawdust. Years of living quiet had taught him to keep his distance from strangers. But this time, for reasons he couldn't name, his eyes stayed fixed. In the woman stepping down from that weary coach, he saw something both familiar and foreign. A strength that needed no proof, and a loneliness he knew too well. Their eyes met. For a few seconds, all sound, the wind, the horses, the whispers, fell away. Only they. The blinding sun remained, and two pairs of eyes holding across the red dust street. Isabel startled, then looked aside with calm restraint, though a faint tremor brushed her lips. Rhett betrayed nothing, save the straightening of his back, yet inside his chest, his heart beat off its steady rhythm. The boarding house keeper stepped out, her shrill voice cutting the hush. Need a room? Price ain't cheap, but you'll get a clean bed. Isabel nodded. Her voice was tired, yet clear. I'll stay. For how long? I don't know. Glances flickered among the bystanders. Stay? A black widow alone. Such a choice would give the town weeks of talk. Rhett didn't move. He watched Isabel step inside, her posture upright, though her steps dragged heavy with miles. When the door closed, he realized his hand still gripped the porch post tight, veins standing out. He let out a breath, turned back to his unfinished boards. But the pause, that brief meeting of eyes in Confronting, the dust, had planted a seed in him, a seed he knew would not be easily forgotten. Inside, Isabel set her bags on the floor, leaned against the wall, and closed her eyes. She was drained, nearly too spent to think, yet the image lingered, a pair of gray, steady eyes watching her from across the street. Outside, the sun sank low, shadows stretching long over Redstone. In the stillness, a story had just been written on its first line, born of a glance that seemed like chance, but would change everything. Morning in Redstone began with a heavy wind driving red dust in hazy ribbons along the main street. Isabel Turner adjusted the scarf on her head. The hem of her worn dress dragged through the grit, and she did not bother to shake it clean. After her first night in the narrow upstairs room of the boarding house, she had made her decision. If she meant to stay, she would need work, her own way to live. The first place she thought of was Peterson's old general store, set square in the center of town, where every soul stopped at least once a day. The bell above the door jingled when Isabel pushed it open. A few faces lifted, their eyes resting on her skin, pausing a beat. One woman pulled her young boy close, whispering something that made him stare openly. Isabel kept her back straight, as if she heard nothing, saw nothing. She stepped to the counter, her voice steady. "Mr. Peterson, I am looking for work. I can keep accounts, measure goods, and keep things in order. If you need help, I can do it." Peterson, lean and weathered, his eyes kind yet uneasy, looked at her, then around the room. A woman weighing sugar and flour snorted loud, her words meant for every ear. "There's no shortage of help here. What you need, Peterson, is someone local, not—" She left the words hanging, her glance dropping pointedly to Isabel's skin. Isabel did not flinch. Her eyes stayed calm, though her hand tightened on the worn ledger she carried. Peterson coughed, faltered. "Come back this afternoon. We'll see." Isabel nodded, turned, and walked out. Behind her, whispers rose like a draft through the rafters. She caught each fragment, but she left them in the dust, head high. That afternoon she returned, carrying a cloth-wrapped ledger. Inside were careful notes of every expense from her journey to Redstone. Peterson flipped through a few pages, saw the neat script, the swift sums, and his old face eased. He nodded. "You can try. The pay's not much, but if you're willing—" The door banged open. 3 women entered, dresses crisp, faces severe. At their head was Martha, head of the church committee, her eyes sharp as a blade. "Peterson," she said, "we hear you mean to hire Miss Turner. You really plan to put someone like that behind your counter?" Peterson faltered, voice shrinking. "It's my business, Martha." "No, it concerns all of Redstone." She turned on Isabel, her voice cold. "Miss Turner, you are not welcome in our church gatherings, and we do not agree to see you behind this counter. Redstone has its ways. You do not belong here." The air froze. Isabel stood tall, her gaze level. Anger rose in her chest, but long years had taught her how to hold it still. Then a tall figure filled the doorway. Rhett Callahan, sleeves dusted with sawdust, work gloves in hand, his steady eyes sweeping the scene. "What's going on here?" His voice was low, firm. Martha's chin lifted. "This doesn't concern you." "Callahan." Rhett folded his arms, eyes clear but calm. "Strange. I thought the church welcomed all believers, and this store belongs to Peterson, not the church. Who he hires is his say, not yours." Silence pressed in. Martha's lips thinned. She knew better than to spar with Rhett, well respected for his blunt fairness and his hands that built half the town. She turned, muttering, and swept out with the others at her heels. At the door she cast Isabel a final, scornful glance. Isabel did not blink. When the door shut, Rhett gave Isabel a single nod, then stepped back into the street, as though what he had done mattered little. Days later, Isabel began her work. She scrubbed shelves, arranged stock, balanced the ledgers so cleanly Peterson praised her without end. Yet outside the murmurs never stilled. Some customers turned away from her hand. Others mocked as she swept the stoop. Isabel swallowed it all, leaving only the sweat that fell from her brow as her answer. One evening, a heavy crate arrived. Isabel bent low, trying to lift it, her back straining under the weight. Suddenly, a rough hand caught the edge beside hers. "Careful," came the deep voice behind her. She turned. Rhett Callahan lifted the crate as though it were nothing and set it on the floor. The last light of day slanted across his face, sweat on his brow, gray eyes deep as forest shade. Isabel froze a heartbeat. Their eyes locked again, close enough that she heard her own heart stumble. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice steady but trembling at its edge. "I could manage." He said nothing, only gave a slight nod, then walked out, his boots leaving firm, unhurried steps. Isabel stood still, her hands faintly shaking. She stared at the crate as though it were her own heart, heavy and unsettled, yet strangely stirred. She knew the whispers in Redstone would linger. The doubtful eyes would follow her still. But in that brief moment, with a hand steadying more than just a box, she had felt something she had long been denied, a quiet recognition. And sometimes, that alone was enough to plant hope. In the days Isabel worked at the general store, Redstone never stopped talking. Gossip moved faster than desert wind, and this time it turned toward Rhett Callahan. Folks whispered that he hadn't always lived in Redstone. Years back, after his wife's death, Rhett had left. No one knew where he wandered, only that he returned worn and weary, opening a lumber shop and living quiet at the town's edge. Some said he carried a shadowed past, a grief that hung like a ghost around the timber walls of his house. Isabel heard these whispers whenever she stepped onto the street. At first, she brushed them aside, thinking it the price of life in a small town, where every soul believed they knew the measure of another. But one noon, when she and Rhett hauled a heavy plank together, she caught his gaze. In his eyes lay something no rumor could name, a grief sealed deep, a weight that bent even a tall man into half-silence. That evening the sky thickened with clouds, the scent of storm heavy on the wind. Isabel left the boarding house just as the downpour broke. Rain slammed the dirt street into mud. Dust turned to paste under her shoes. She ran for cover, dress clinging, breath sharp. Under the porch of an empty house she stopped, heart racing. A figure already stood there. Rhett Callahan, shirt soaked dark, hair plastered with rain, leaning against a post. He shifted slightly, wordless, making space for her. They stood side by side, watching the white curtain of rain. Heavy drops drummed the roof above like a relentless song. Isabel clasped her hands, hesitated, then spoke. "People say, you left Redstone for years." Rhett exhaled slowly, eyes on the storm. "I did." "Because your wife passed?" He nodded, gaze never moving. "She died young. I couldn't bear the empty house, couldn't bear the silence where laughter used to be. So I left. Thought distance would dull it, but all I did was carry the sorrow with me." His voice was low, but each word landed like a stone. Isabel glanced at him, his face etched with shadow, his gray eyes stripped of their usual strength, veiled in loss. She waited, then whispered, "I understand." For the first time, Rhett turned fully toward her, meeting her eyes through the rain. "You lost someone too?" Isabel gave a small nod. "I married at 19. He worked on a distant ranch. One hot day, a beam fell, and it ended. I barely learned to be a wife before I became a widow. Her voice caught, but did not break. His family saw me as a burden, a young black widow, no worth to them but to leave. So I left. A chill gust carried rain beneath the porch, wetting her sleeves. She didn't bother to move. For the first time, she saw in the man beside her a mirror of her own pain. "We're the same," Rhett murmured. "Both lost. Both ran. Yet somehow, we end up back here." Isabel lifted her face, rain streaking down hair pulled beneath her scarf. "Maybe we weren't running. Maybe we were just searching for a place that would take us in." Her words left Rhett silent. He turned back to the storm, his large hand gripping the post tight before easing. For a moment, Isabel thought he might answer. Instead, there was only a look, deep, unguarded. It was not curiosity nor pity. It was recognition. The kind that saw another soul scarred the same way, carrying the same loneliness. In that short span under a leaking porch, Isabel no longer felt like an outsider in a town thick with judgment. Rain hammered down, thunder rolling faint in the distance. But between them, silence softened into something almost steady. Rhett stood firm, saying nothing more, yet Isabel heard his breathing, a calm presence beside her. When the storm eased, drops thinning to a scattered patter, Isabel turned slightly. Their eyes met once more. No words, only a nod, light, but enough. A silent promise that they had understood one another a little more. They stepped from the porch, each taking a different poem. But Isabel knew from that rain-soaked afternoon she was no longer a stranger to Rhett Callahan. And he, in his way, had let her press against the wall he had long built around his heart. Autumn rolled in, laying soft gold across the grasslands around Redstone. The town itself stirred with a brighter rhythm, for the Harvest Festival was the grandest event of the year, a time to give thanks for the yield and to steal a little joy after long months of hard work. By morning, the main street was lined with colored bunting, tables set along both sides, children darting between wagons with faces lit in excitement. Isabel Turner stepped from the small kitchen behind the boarding house, carrying a tray of warm pastries. The scent of cinnamon and butter drifted into the air, washing over the ever-present dust. Her old apron was stained with flour, her hair tied back with stray curls clinging damp to her cheeks. It was her first time at Redstone's festival, and she knew not everyone welcomed her presence. Yet, as always, she lifted her chin and walked steady. Across the street, Rhett Callahan worked on a wooden stall. His hands gripped the beams firm, driving nails with quick, certain blows. He seldom joined town gatherings, but this year he had agreed, partly for Peterson's sake, partly, perhaps, because he knew Isabel would be there. By noon, townsfolk gathered around the stalls. Isabel laid her tray on a borrowed wooden table, steam still rising from the crusts. A cluster of children edged close, their eyes wide. A small girl whispered, "May I try one?" Isabel smiled and handed her a pastry. Yet before the child could taste it, her mother pulled her back, voice sharp. "No, put it down. You can't eat that." She turned away, dragging the girl, leaving the tray abandoned. The air fell taut. Isabel stood straight, her face calm, though her hand clenched white beneath her apron. A few others glanced at one another, hesitated, then drifted off. The sweet smell could not erase the fact of her skin. Rhett, finishing his stall only yards away, had seen it all. He strode over without pause. In the hush, he took a pastry, broke it in two, and bit down. Good. His voice rang steady. Anyone who turns this away is only cheating themselves. A laugh broke the silence, a few sheepish shakes of the head. Then a young man stepped forward, took one, and ate. A woman followed, then another. Soon the tray grew lighter. Isabel kept her smile, but in her heart she knew who had saved the moment. The afternoon carried on with the fiddle's bright tunes, children's laughter, and the smoke of roasting meat drifting through the street. Rhett busied himself at the stall, though now and then his eyes slid toward Isabel. Once, as she turned, their gazes locked across the crowd. Isabel faltered, lowering her eyes to her tray. Rhett's mouth bent, half smile, half restraint. As the sun fell low, pouring honey gold over the town, space was cleared at the center of the street for dancing. Waltz melodies rose from the small band, couples stepping hand in hand onto the packed earth. Isabel stood at the edge, her tray now empty. She had not thought anyone would ask. But then a strong hand reached toward her. Rhett Callahan, white shirt smudged with dust, sweat at his brow, gray eyes steady. He said nothing, only held his hand out. For a breath, Isabel wavered. She saw the stares, some mocking, some startled, but all fell away beneath the rush of her pulse. She laid her hand in his. He closed his fingers firm, reassuring. Then they stepped into the circle. The music rose, slow and gentle. Rhett's other hand settled at her back, guiding sure and even. Isabel stumbled once, then found the rhythm, her skirt sweeping soft around her steps, loose curls brushing her temple. In that moment, the world receded. They saw only each other. Hand to hand, warmth passing between, eyes searching, holding longer than courtesy allowed. In Rhett's gaze she glimpsed sorrow softened, warmed by something new. In Isabel's eyes, he saw strength unbroken, tinged with a hesitation that shook his guarded heart. When the music ceased, they still held on. Applause thundered around them, but Isabel heard only her heartbeat. Rhett bent slightly, his words meant for her alone. "Thank you for dancing with me." Her smile trembled, but her eyes shone bright in the dusk. The night carried on, music and laughter swelling. Yet what Isabel carried from that harvest evening was not the festival itself, but a single moment. Her hand held firm before every gaze. A small thing, perhaps, but perhaps also the beginning of something far deeper. After the harvest festival, Redstone still carried the echo of fiddles and laughter. Yet the joy was short, for a problem soon showed itself. The wooden bridge east of town, the main route for goods coming in and out, had been battered by the last storm. Planks washed away, posts splintered, leaving wagons to detour miles out of their way. Loads of flour, grain, even mail ran late. At the weekly market meeting, townsfolk gathered on the main street. Voices rose, but all were complaints. If the bridge is out, how do we trade? Best wait for the county men to send workers. And what do we have to rebuild it with? Isabel stood among them, her small ledger clutched in hand. She listened, then raised her voice. "We can rebuild it ourselves," she said, clear enough that heads turned. "No need to wait on outsiders. Each of us can give a part. One to cut timber, one to frame, one to bring food. If we work together, it'll be done soon enough." Silence fell. Then a laugh broke out. "And who are you to say that?" a man jeered. "You've been here weeks. What do you know about bridges?" A woman shook her head, eyes locked on Isabel. Redstone doesn't take orders from an outsider. Murmurs of agreement spread. Isabel kept her back straight, though her heart pounded. She had known it would be so. She had grown used to being dismissed for her skin, but still she had hoped someone might hear her. A low voice cut through. Miss Turner is right. The crowd shifted. Rhett Callahan stepped forward, tall frame casting its shadow, sawdust still clinging to his hands. His words came slow, steady. The bridge is broken, and we're the ones losing. No one else will pay that price. Wait on government? Could be a month. If we want it soon, we start now. I'll give the timber and the labor. The mood stirred. Some began to object, but Rhett's unwavering gaze silenced them. At last, old Peterson spoke. If Callahan's willing, so am I. We can't just sit and watch. That opened the door. Gradually came nods, murmurs of assent. Though doubt still lingered, though eyes still weighed Isabel harshly, the plan had begun. In the days that followed, the bridge became a shared work. Men hauled beams and swung hammers. Women prepared meals for the crew. Isabel was there each morning, sleeves rolled high, hair bound back. She did more than keep the tallies. She lifted wood, carried nails, sweat shining across her brow, her eyes bright with resolve. Rhett was never far. When she strained beneath a heavy beam, his hand caught the other end, their shoulders brushing as they lifted together. Isabel started at the touch, then steadied, their steps falling in rhythm. The timber dropped into place with a solid thud, their breaths ragged in unison. Isabel laughed, sudden, light, like wind across dry fields. Rhett looked at her, a rare curve of his mouth. At rest, they sat on the bank, sharing cornbread. Isabel dabbed sweat with a handkerchief. Rhett offered his water flask. Simple moments, but enough to draw curious stares, some warm, some sour. Isabel noticed, yet instead of lowering her head, she met Rhett's gaze. He did not look away. In his gray eyes, she read it plain. I stand with you. By evening, the sun bled red over the creek, reflecting off the rising frame of the bridge. The first spans took shape, the skeleton of the crossing steadying. Rhett drove the day's final nail, the hammer ringing sharp, then wiped his brow. Isabel crossed with an armful of planks. Handing them to him, her shoulder brushed his again. Both paused in the brief stillness. Isabel smiled faintly. See? We're doing what they thought we couldn't. Rhett's eyes softened. Not we. You. The words startled her. She turned quickly, her heart thudding fast. The work was far from finished, and prejudice far from gone. Yet in shoulders brushing, in hands meeting over rough timber, Isabel felt another bridge rising, an unseen span, carrying her and Rhett closer with each step, each unspoken gesture. The 5th day of bridge building ended under a blazing afternoon sun. As townsfolk drifted home, the half-finished frame lay quiet above the creek. Isabel pulled her scarf close, sweat and dust streaking her cheeks. Beside her, Rhett's bare arms were rough with sawdust and mud. When the crew scattered, only the two of them stayed, gathering the last of the tools. The sun sank slow behind the hills, giving way to violet dusk. Cool air rose off the water, making Isabel shiver. Rhett glanced her way, then wordlessly struck a fire from a pile of dry sticks. The flames leapt bright against the dark, softening the firm lines of her face. They sat close, no more than an arm apart. Isabel spread her hands to the heat, slim fingers blackened with ash. A small laugh escaped her. When I first came to Redstone, I never thought I'd end a day with dirty hands like these. Rhett tilted his head, gray eyes glinting in the firelight. Not so bad. At least you pushed this town to move. Without you, that bridge might sit broken another year. She smiled faintly. Then her gaze dimmed. You know, I once believed I belonged nowhere. My husband's kin turned me out, and the place I was born never wanted me back. I thought I'd wander forever until I stopped here. The night wind carried her words, low and fragile. Rhett didn't answer. He listened, as if every word deserved to be held. She turned her palms, studying the soot. You lost a wife. I lost a husband. Maybe those spaces never fill. But sitting here, I don't feel alone anymore. Rhett stretched a hand toward the fire, stopping just shy of hers. Not touching, only close enough that she felt the warmth bridge the gap. She lifted her eyes and met his, no longer shadowed but clear and still like water after storm. Silence lingered. Then Isabel moved her hand, letting her fingertips brush his knuckles. A slight touch, but she did not pull away. Rhett closed his hand around hers, gentle, wordless, yet truer than any vow. They stayed by the fire until the coals dulled and night closed in. Rhett rose first, offered his hand. Isabel hesitated only a breath, then placed her own in his. He led her toward the small cabin at the edge of town, where a lamp often burned late into the night. The door opened on a plain room, scented of fresh timber and wood smoke. Isabel stood on the threshold, heart racing, yet Rhett still held her hand, firm and sure. He shut the door behind them. In the quiet, they faced one another. Isabel saw the rugged lines of his face, the loss carved deep, but also something else, the need to be trusted, to be wanted. She stepped closer. Rhett bent low. Their first kiss was not hurried nor fierce, but slow, gentle, like two souls relearning how to touch after years of silence. His hand cupped her cheek. Her arms circled his back. For a moment, the hollow places in their hearts filled with nothing more than presence. That night, within the wooden walls, they gave one another the tenderest thing, not to erase the past, but to build the home both had long missed. When Isabel whispered, "Rhett," her voice trembled, yet carried peace. His arms tightened, as if to say he would not let it go again. Outside, the night wind swept Redstone, carrying red dust toward the distant hills. Inside the small cabin, two lost souls found each other, truly for the first time. The next morning, Redstone woke to a stir unlike any other. Rumors ran quicker than the mailman's boots. At the boarding house door, in the market, even along the church fence, the same bitter refrain carried. Isabel Turner slept with Rhett Callahan. No one knew where it began. Perhaps from someone passing Rhett's cabin the night before, or perhaps born of the spite of those who never wanted Isabel here at all. But once whispered, twisted, embroidered, it became a sentence. The fabric seller sneered as Isabel walked past, tilting her chin toward her companion. "See? I told you. A shameless widow." A blacksmith barked a coarse laugh behind her. "Callahan's found himself a way to keep warm this winter." Isabel heard every word, each one falling like stone. Her steps slowed, her throat tight. She had grown used to suspicion, to disdain, but this time the tremor in her chest came from truth itself. They had shared a night, tender, quiet, and now it was dragged into the dirt for mockery. That afternoon, back in her small room above the boarding house, Isabel sat on the bed's edge, hands clenched. One thought throbbed. I must leave, before it worsens. Redstone had never been gentle ground. She was tired of proving herself. The door opened. Rhett stepped in, shirt still marked with sawdust, his face set. He asked nothing, only met her eyes. I've heard, he said low, what they're saying. Isabel pressed her lips, turned away. You see, this will never be my place. Best I go before I drag you into the same laughter. Rhett came forward, dropped to one knee before her, his gray eyes grave. Isabel, I don't care what they say. Only this matters. You stay. His words rang firm, but Isabel's tears brimmed. You don't understand. My whole life I've been dismissed. I won't pull you down too. He gripped her hands, voice steady as oak. If they mean to stand against us, let them see it plain. I won't hide. Sunday came, and Redstone's church was fuller than usual. Not just for prayer, but for the show folks expected. Isabel approached, palms damp, intending to slip to the back pew as always. But Rhett was waiting. He said nothing, simply held out his hand. Dozens of eyes pressed in. Fear urged Isabel to flee. But Rhett's gaze, quiet, unwavering, held her still. Slowly, she placed her hand in his, and he did not release it. He led her down the center aisle, past rows crowded with stares. Whispers stirred, a hiss of disapproval. Rhett paid them no mind. He sat in the front pew, Isabel at his side, his hand firm over hers, for all to see. The weight hung thick. Then the old pastor began his reading, voice pulling the room back toward prayer. Isabel sat silent, heart pounding, yet within she felt warmth. Rhett had not hidden. He had chosen openly. By that, he had chosen her. After service, clusters gathered outside the church steps. The whispers still simmered. A middle-aged woman shook her head, shameful. But then another voice rose clear. I see nothing shameful. Isabel helped us with the bridge. Without her, we'd still be waiting. Heads turned. It was old Peterson, thin frame upright, eyes calm. I'll hear no slander of Miss Turner. I owe her thanks. Surprise rippled the crowd. Then another spoke. That's right. I've tasted her baking, better than most. Murmurs shifted. Still some harsh glances, but now others softened, uncertain, even guilty. Standing at Rhett's side, Isabel's chest eased. She understood. Sometimes one open hand, held firm, was enough to turn the tide. Not because the rumors vanished, but because she no longer stood alone. Rhett's grip tightened once more, his gaze unyielding, a pillar amid the noise. Isabel looked up, her eyes bright with a new trust. Trust that in Redstone, perhaps, she was finally being seen. The work stretched on for weeks, through dry, sunny days and into the chill winds of autumn. Redstone's folk, though still whispering, had set aside complaint and bent to the task. Men hauled timber and set frames. Women carried food. Children scampered underfoot, scooping up dropped nails, their laughter mingling with the ring of hammers. Slowly, the bridge took shape. Plank by plank, nail by nail, posts sunk deep into the creek bed. The hammering, the calls, the mix of weary laughter, it all rose into a single song of labor. Isabel was there each day, sometimes tallying the timber, sometimes shoulder to shoulder with Rhett bracing beams. Hands once shaped by flour now bore calluses from rope and hammer, yet her eyes shone brighter with each passing hour. Rhett was close always. When she slipped on a damp board, his grip caught her arm. When she faltered beneath weight, he lifted with her, their shoulders brushing. Day by day, sweat and sawdust wound them tighter, an unseen thread binding closer. By month's end, the bridge stood finished. On a misted morning, the town gathered by the water's edge. A red ribbon stretched across the span, a small table holding shears and fresh-baked bread. A hush fell, almost sacred. For this was more than wood and nails. It was proof the town itself could rise to what seemed impossible. Isabel lingered in the crowd, hands trembling. She had no thought of being called forward, only to watch. But then Peterson stepped to the center, his voice carrying. This bridge stands by all our hands, but one voice began it, one who stirred us to start. I ask Miss Isabel Turner to cut the ribbon. Silence gripped the bank. Murmurs swelled, faces tightened, heads shook. Isabel froze, her heart hammering. Then from behind, Rhett's warm hand pressed gentle at her back, urging her on. She stepped forward, each pace heavy as stone. Eyes followed, some sharp with doubt, some merely curious. She lifted the shears, her hand shaking hard, but she drew a breath, raised her head, and cut the ribbon clean. A cheer burst across the creek. Children shouted, a few clapped, and then the sound grew until the whole crowd joined in. Isabel stood stunned, eyes glistening. For the first time she was not outsider, but part of Redstone itself. At the edge of the crowd, Rhett stayed apart, saying nothing, only watching. His gray eyes held her face alight beneath the morning sun, her smile quiet yet proud. In his look was pride unspoken, and a tenderness needing no name. When Isabel turned back, their gazes met. She saw him standing firm, like a pillar among the many. Her unease melted away, replaced by trust. She was no longer alone. The townsfolk poured across the new bridge, testing the sturdy boards. Children ran wild, their laughter ringing, grown men and women crossing with relief and cheer. Isabel still stood by the cut ribbon, shears tight in hand, her eyes never leaving Rhett's figure smiling from a distance, and within her rose a thought. Perhaps this bridge did more than join two banks of a creek. Perhaps it joined two souls, once broken and solitary, now finding each other in the dust and wind of Redstone. One late autumn afternoon, the wind swept sharp across the red dirt road leading out of Redstone. Isabel was returning from the riverbank, a basket of wild greens and dry sticks in her arms. Passing the abandoned stable at the town's edge, she caught the sound of muffled sobs. Her steps slowed. She tilted her head. Yes, the faint crying was there, thin and trembling, as though afraid of being heard. She pushed the warped wooden door. Inside it was dim, heavy with the sour scent of old straw. In the corner sat a small girl, 6 or 7, curled tight, her patched clothes hanging loose. Dark eyes widened at Isabel in fright, skinny hands gripping a hollow belly. "What's your name?" Isabel asked softly, her voice gentle, careful not to startle. The child said nothing, only shrank back. Isabel lowered herself to the floor, bringing the basket forward. "Eat. You'll feel better." After a moment's hesitation, the tiny hand reached, trembling, and seized the piece of bread Isabel had tucked among the greens. She ate fast, tears streaming down her cheeks. Isabel watched, her chest aching sharp. Memories rose, the hunger, the cold rejection in her husband's house, the long nights of being cast aside. The girl felt like a mirror to her own past. Isabel reached to smooth the child's tangled hair. This time the girl did not pull away. That evening, Isabel carried the child back with her. The town knew by nightfall. Word spread like fire on dry grass. People muttered, "A black widow was strange enough. Now she takes in a colored orphan? Who could bear it?" Some shook their heads, others sneered, just looking for attention. On the stoop of the lumber shop, Rhett saw Isabel leading the child by the hand. The girl clung to Isabel's skirt, eyes wide like a frightened fawn. Rhett stepped close, gaze steady, not judging. "Where's she from?" Isabel told it plain, her voice low as if afraid of the words. "She has no one. I couldn't leave her." Rhett did not answer at once. He knelt to the girl's height, his rough hands resting gentle on his knees. "What do you need most?" The child whispered, so faint Isabel barely caught it. "A home." In that moment, Rhett's eyes met Isabel's. He gave a slow nod, his voice deep. "Then the girl needs a family." The words carried farther than a simple reply. They became a shield against the town's scorn. Still, opposition did not fade easily. The next morning in the market, Isabel heard the whispers. An old woman clicked her tongue. "She's taking on a burden." Another curled her lip, as if she's some kind of saint. Isabel's arm tightened around the girl, heart racing. Then Rhett appeared, broad shoulders blocking the way, his eyes hard. "If you've words to speak, say them to me. She and the child are under my roof." The crowd hushed, scattering with nothing more to say. In the days that followed, the girl opened little by little. Her name was Ofu, Anna. At night, Isabel stitched by the oil lamp while Anna sat nearby, wide-eyed, watching each stitch. Rhett sometimes brought scraps of wood, showing her how to fit them into a horse, a small house. Laughter, childish and bright, filled the room that once knew only sighs. But the trial was not only from outside. Isabel lay awake nights, wondering if she could be a mother again. Would raising Anna under constant stares rob her of a fair chance? Rhett often sat close, listening to the storm within her. One night, he laid his hand over hers, his voice quiet, steady. "Isabel, you survived all you've lost. The girl will learn strength from you, only by having you there. And me, I'll not let you bear it alone." Anna slowly learned to call Isabel Mama Belle, the name halting but sweet as honey. The first time she called Rhett Papa Rhett, he turned away quick, as though sawdust had flown into his eyes. One morning, Anna tugged Isabel's hand, leading her onto the new wooden bridge, sunlight pouring gold across the boards. She whispered, "I used to be scared no one would want me. But now I have a home, don't I?" Isabel dropped to her knees, pulling the child close, her voice breaking. "Yes, you have a home, and you always will." From a distance, Rhett watched, a quiet smile spreading across his weathered face. In that moment, he knew. Their greatest trial was not gossip nor rejection, but learning how to love wholly. so that three souls, once broken, might find shelter together. Winter morning light crept pale across the rooftops, a thin veil of frost clinging to every shingle. Isabel sat at the wooden table, a quill trembling but firm between her fingers. Before her lay the petition for adoption, a sheet she had wrestled with through long nights of doubt. The oil lamp cast a wavering glow, catching her eyes, anxious yet steadfast. Upstairs, Anna still slept soundly, curls spread across the pillow, her breath rising in even whispers, fragile as a promise of new beginnings. Rhett descended the stairs, carrying with him the resinous scent of pine from the lumberyard. He stopped, watching Isabel bow over the paper, her hand moving in a final stroke. He didn't ask. He already knew what the act meant. Quietly, he came closer, laid his broad hand upon her shoulder. "I'll raise her with you," Rhett said, voice rough but solid as oak. Isabel lifted her gaze, eyes shimmering, and smiled. In that moment, the loneliness that had once weighed like iron seemed to lift away. When Isabel carried the petition to the Redstone courthouse, the town seemed to hold its breath. Some whispered sharp words as she passed, but when the heavy wooden doors opened, the sight gave pause even to the bitter. Isabel, in her simple brown dress, walked with Anna's small hand tight in her own, steady, trusting. Rhett strode beside them, broad-shouldered and silent, his hand clasping Isabel's for all to see. Inside, the judge shuffled papers, glancing over the trio before him. Anna shrank close, tiny fingers gripping Isabel's skirt. Rhett bent down, his rough palm resting gently on the child's shoulder. "It's all right," he murmured. "Papa's here." Anna's eyes widened, then softened, a glow of trust breaking through like sun after storm. When the gavel struck and the adoption was granted, Isabel felt warmth surge through her like she had never known. Outside, the murmurs were not as sharp. Some still turned away, yet others nodded, and a few let respect soften their gaze. That afternoon, the three crossed the new wooden bridge together. Anna ran ahead, her little dress lifting in the breeze, laughter ringing bright across the planks. Isabel and Rhett walked side by side, their hands entwined as though they had never been parted. "Do you think the town will ever accept us?" Isabel asked softly, eyes following the child's darting figure. Rhett tightened his grip. "They don't have to. We'll live true, and one day, the life we build will answer for us." And slowly, Redstone began to change. The woman who once turned away now stepped into Isabel's bakery, buying a loaf with a hesitant smile. A young mother brought her child to play with Anna, nervous at first, but slowly warming. Suspicion gave way to cautious nods, sometimes even to quiet respect. One Sunday morning, the church bells tolled across the frosty air. Isabel entered the chapel with Anna by her side and Rhett behind them. The very place that had once barred her now opened wide its doors. No one spoke against them. Instead, people shuffled aside, making space. Isabel sat, Anna's head resting against her shoulder, Rhett's strong hands folded on his knees. The little family's presence was so calm, so whole, that a few in the pews lowered their eyes, uneasy with the stirrings of conscience. That night, after Anna slept, Isabel and Rhett sat on the porch, the moon stretching their shadows long across the boards. Isabel whispered, "Today, for the first time, I didn't feel like a stranger. I have a home. We have a family." Rhett turned, his eyes lit silver by moonlight. A chosen family, he said slowly. Not bound by blood, but by heart. And that, Isabel, will hold stronger than anything else. From the small room upstairs drifted the sound of Anna's laughter in sleep, sweet and unguarded, spilling through the open window. Isabel leaned her head against Rhett's shoulder, letting the night air and the beat of his heart dissolve every remnant of the years she had been called an outsider. She was no longer just a black widow in a town of prejudice. She was a mother, a partner, the center of a home that was slowly, surely, taking root in the light. That winter came earlier than any Redstone could remember. Bitter winds swept down from the plains, carrying sheets of snow that buried the earth beneath a white shroud. The road into town all but vanished under layers of ice, wagons from neighboring settlements unable to pass. In the storerooms, sacks of flour, barrels of salt, and the last parcels of sugar dwindled day by day. Inside her small shop, Isabel ran her fingers over the worn pages of her ledger. She knew too well the supplies would never last the season. Yet when she lifted her gaze to the frosted window, she saw women clutching children close, old men bent against the wind, searching for scraps to take home. Her chest tightened. "We share," she whispered, as if to herself. And with that, she unlatched the door, set fresh loaves upon the counter, and lifted the lid on a half-full barrel of grain. At first, townsfolk hesitated. Then, one by one, they stepped forward. They accepted modest portions, their eyes shining with thanks more eloquent than words. An elderly woman, hands trembling around her bundle of flour, reached out and pressed Isabel's hand, as though to say more than her lips could. Isabel only nodded, swallowing the ache in her throat. Rhett had not agreed at first. His jaw had tightened when Isabel suggested sharing what little they had. "If we give too freely, there'll be nothing left for spring," he warned. But when he returned to find her wiping tears from a hungry child's face, his resistance broke. With a weary sigh, he set to work building an extra storehouse, moving sacks of seed wheat under tarpaulin and stacking them in dry corners. "If we don't guard the seed, we'll have nothing to plant come spring," he said, hammer echoing through the cold. Days slowed to the rhythm of breath in frozen air. Redstone survived, each family scraping by. And though gossip had not disappeared, it carried a different tone now. Suspicion gave way to something else. Respect, even a quiet hope, whenever Isabel's name was spoken. Nights fell long and heavy with snow. In the small cabin, Isabel sat by the oil lamp, needle flashing silver in her hand. She stitched the frayed sleeves of Rhett's old work shirt, smiling faintly at the memory of his sigh when he tore it, yet wore it anyway. Beside her, Anna watched with sleepy fascination, her dark eyes following each loop of thread until a yawn carried her head down into Isabel's lap. The door opened, bringing a flurry of white. Rhett entered, brushing snow from his shoulders, boots heavy with frost. He paused at the sight. Isabel bent over her sewing. Anna nestled against her. Something in him eased. He crossed the room, sat beside her, and laid his calloused hand over hers, stopping the needle mid-stitch. She looked up, surprised. "What is it?" Rhett's gray eyes held hers, steady and low as his voice. "You're the home I've been looking for." The words fell into the winter hush, soft yet resounding, louder than the wind howling outside. Isabel's breath caught, tears rising unbidden. She didn't wipe them away. Instead, she placed her hand atop his, letting the warmth of his palm spread into her. Beyond the walls, snow thickened, blanketing the eaves and fences, muting the world in white. But inside another light grew, brighter than the flicker of the oil lamp, steadier than the fire in the hearth. It was the warmth of three lives knit together, bound by love forged in loss. And Isabel knew then, no matter how harsh the winter raged, her heart had found its shelter. Years passed, and Redstone was no longer the dust-blown outpost Isabel first set foot in. The dirt streets had been laid smooth, houses stood along the riverbank, and the timber bridge she and Rhett once raised with the townsfolk still held strong, a symbol of endurance. Folks retold that story as part of Redstone's history, how a widowed black woman and a widowed man had stirred the town to build again, and how Redstone was never the same after. The little shop Isabel once kept had grown into the largest store in the county. Long shelves lined the walls. The scent of fresh ground flour mingled with dry pine, and travelers stopped not only to trade but to feel the warmth woven into Isabel's smile. Rhett kept his quiet manner, but his hands had built new barns, new warehouses, even cottages for families settling nearby. Anna, the girl Isabel carried home from that abandoned stable, had grown tall and graceful. Her black eyes still shone with the same clarity as the day Isabel found her, but now carried a confidence of her own. She kept the ledgers with steady hands, speaking easily with customers. When newcomers marveled to hear she was adopted, Anna would answer with a calm smile. Family isn't what people call you. It's where your heart chooses to stay. Redstone itself had changed its gaze. The cold stares and whispered judgment had softened into greetings on the street, some even into respect. For the town had seen Isabel and Rhett not only raise a child, but shape the community with honesty and resolve. Each evening, when the day's work was done, the three would sit on the porch of their timber house and look out over the prairie. The wind carried the scent of wild grass. The creek murmured under the bridge, and in the distance horses grazed along the slope. Sometimes Anna's laughter rang clear. Sometimes silence lay between them. Yet it was a silence full, not empty. One summer dusk, the sky burned deep orange. Isabel sat between them, Anna resting her head on her shoulder, Rhett's hand covering hers. No words were needed. Loneliness, prejudice, rumors, all had slipped into the past. What remained was a home, steady and whole, where three souls once broken now lived as a family. Isabel turned toward Rhett, her eyes lit by the fading sun. Softly, she whispered, "Love needs no words, only that we choose each other, again and again." Rhett smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Anna's fingers tightened around her mother's hand, her lips curving with a quiet joy only youth can hold. And in that moment, beneath the fire of the sunset, the three of them sat together, a simple, unshakable family. The circle of loss closed, opening instead onto a long road of peace. Some stories do not end on the last page. They linger like wind beneath the eaves, like sunset still glowing at the edge of the sky. So it was with Isabel Turner and Rhett Callahan. Their journey had stretched far, from the first harsh whispers of Redstone. Through the winter they endured side by side, to evenings spent watching Anna grow strong. Theirs was not only a tale of man and woman, but of a love that chose kindness, chose steadfastness, chose each other time and again. Close your eyes, and you can still see Isabel in her plain brown dress, smiling quiet yet proud. You can see Rhett standing tall on the porch, broad shoulders softened by the gentleness in his eyes. You can hear Anna's laughter as she ran across the wooden bridge, her voice carrying like a new song over Redstone. A widowed black woman, a widowed man, and an orphan child, three pieces that seemed not to fit, yet locked together, forming a home stronger than any prejudice. For those who have traveled far in years, perhaps this story carries a reflection of their own lives. We have known loss, endured the sting of gossip, faced hours when the next step seemed impossible. But Isabel and Rhett remind us, no matter our age, color, or past, what keeps us upright is love, plain and steady, choosing each other day after day. So friends, if your heart stirred here at the end, share with us. Has anyone ever been a home to you? Has anyone walked beside you through the bitter winds? Leave your words below, for sometimes telling your memory is the comfort another soul is waiting for. And if you cherish warm tales such as this, Wild West love stories full of hardship, yet brimming with hope, press like, subscribe, and share this video so more hearts may hear it. Each share is a small lantern, lighting the path for someone still searching for trust. Life is long, and not all of us are chosen at the start. Yet, as Isabel once whispered, love needs no words, only that we choose each other again and again. And who knows, perhaps even past 65 we may still choose and be chosen, finding at last a warm porch at day's end.